achieve that aim. Unexpected events do happen. And the event I'm referring to, of course, is the COVID pandemic, which has overtaken the world. But I do think that this highlights the importance of taking a long-term view to saving. Such an event can happen again in the future once you're retired. And so it's very important that you have a good, strong, healthy nest egg when you do retire, so that you can get through life's ups and downs.
The first thing that I've come to realize that we have to work on is the medical cover. Medical cover is number one when it comes to a retiree. It's not really the pension. And then number two is now the pension, the liquidity comes in. Then you need some annuity or a drawdown. That one comes in because you need to do work on that. And I'll talk about it later. Because number three is any person who is retiring should make sure he retires without loans, because it's very difficult to pay loans when you are in retirement. So I always advise that you should make sure that you pay off all your loans before you retire. Then I also advise people to start their own small businesses, because what we found out in retirement, you have time, you should be able to do certain things to make sure to take up that time that you have.
If you invest something today with the patience, you save and steadfastly safeguard that saving. In the future, it can manifest itself into very huge investments.
Normally we talk about sustainability in retirement. They say that you should be able to save an amount close to 40%, or you should be able to get 40% when you retire. What I've found out is that what people are getting is 10%. It's not 40% of what they used to get. Because if you have accumulated, for instance, 3 million, and then the amount of one that is given to you, 1 million, then you're left with 2 million. It means your pension is going to be 20,000, which is very, very little money. You can't survive with that.
Pesa hakuna mingi, hakuna kidogo. Unaweza kufanya kitu na pesa hata kama ni kidogo. Bora tu your mindset iwe clear, na uwe unajua pahali unataka kuelekea in the future.
The pension I've been receiving has been of so much help to us. I am assured that my teachers won't miss their salaries.
Nimefurahia sana mambo ya kuretire. Na hiyo pension napata every month, napata, nafurahia.
The pension has given us a very good push up to now, because normally the growth of our school takes minimum 4 years. The 5th year, you see now the school being able to run itself. Now we can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Na naweza kumwambia asiokope retire. Hakika nafurahia sana. Sana, sana, sana.
I say thank you very much. On this 20th year of their existence, I say congratulations. Yes, to the body itself and to all the staff that are working at Retirement Benefits Authority. Without mentioning names, I know almost all of them. Without mentioning names, I say congratulations. And I want also to wish them.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning as we join the Retirement Benefits Authority in celebrating a milestone, a beautiful morning, and we appreciate your presence here. Next 2 hours, we will be having keynote addresses, opening remarks from the CEO of RBA, and also panel discussions to just walk through the journey that the Retirement Benefits Authority and the entire pension sector has taken over the past, 20 years, some of the initiatives that are being put in place now to ensure that our present and our future are successful, and of course, what to expect in the coming years. I'm aware of a strategic plan of 2019 to 2024, so these are some of the updates we will be bringing you, and of course, Thank you for all who are joining us here live from Bomas of Kenya, who've been kind enough to host us here. This is equally a virtual conference, and we have hundreds joining us on our virtual platforms. So of course, we can see them live for a bit. We appreciate all of you logging in and joining us in on this big day as we celebrate a 20-year anniversary for the Retirement Benefits Authority. No mean feat, and in fact, when you look at the numbers, you see that perhaps it is good to celebrate the milestones that we've taken, the key steps that have been taken to ensure that Kenyans in their advanced years live a comfortable life. And this is in the name of saving in pension schemes, and we'll be giving you all the information on that. I am Akisa Wandera. I will be your host this morning as we go through the program. We have keynote addresses that we'll be getting onto shortly, and then later a panel discussion bringing together key stakeholders in this sector to just brainstorm and give us ideas on where we are now, take a look back at where we have come from, and some of the innovations that have been put in place to ensure the growth of this particular sector and the various schemes in this country. Once again, thank you all for joining us here. I would like us to first start with the CEO of the Retirement Benefits Authority, that is Mr. Nzomo Mutuku, CEO Retirement Benefits Authority, and he will be talking to us about the journey that the retirement benefits sector has taken so far. And of course, since the Act was operationalized through the establishment of the Retirement Benefits Authority. And of course, later on, he will be telling you why it is important for you to start saving early. So perhaps let us all take a round of applause to just welcome the CEO of RBA to give us his opening remarks and officially open this conference for us. Those joining us from our virtual platforms, I think we will find a way of doing it. But thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, CEO. You kindly give us your opening remarks. A round of applause for him.
The chairman and board members of RBA, industry representatives of ARBA, Association of Retirement Benefit Schemes, representatives of Fund Managers Association, representatives of the Association of Kenya Insurers, representatives of TASC, the Actual Society of Kenya, service providers, scheme trustees, our fellow financial sector regulators, members of the public, ladies and gentlemen, good morning wherever you are tuned in, logged in from around Kenya and around the world. Good morning and welcome very much to this celebration of RBA at 20 years. I really want to thank you all for joining us today so we can mark this auspicious occasion. As you have heard, I'm just going to take you through the journey of RBA, what we have come through, where we started and where we are today. And then we actually invite the industry players to give us their perspective of what has happened over the 20 years. So thank you everybody for joining. We look forward to a good and interactive session and a lot of healthy discussion. If Krista will allow me, I'll try to share my screen. People around the world, you're able to see my screen. So the 2 decades journey of RBA in Kenya. Let's start from where did we begin? Where did we begin this journey? Then we'll talk about ourselves, because we may be having people who perhaps are not so familiar with RBA. And then we'll talk about how the industry
I think we have a challenge here. We've taken a break. Okay.
Are we back?
Not yet.
It has been a great 20 years for RBA. We have seen a lot of growth in the industry we regulate. When we started, we used to talk about an industry of less than 100 billion shillings. Today, we have an industry of 1.4 trillion shillings.
RBA has grown. The growth has been in terms of numbers and in terms of skills.
In those 20 years, I've seen the industry grow quite well in terms of assets and also in terms of the numbers who have joined various schemes. And also the area of automation, because when I joined RBA, most of the processes were not automated.
We had manual system. And I remember, especially during the end of the financial year, which is in June, we used to have a very big queue running all through the stairs all the way to ground floor because people are bringing manual documents. They used to bring manual documents. You bring the levy check and you bring the manual audited accounts and also the contribution returns together. So what used to happen is that as a result of this, we saw a way of enhancing service delivery to our service providers. And we have provided a system to service providers where they can be able to log into the system and submit these documents online. So for example, the service provider don't need to come here again. What they do is at the comfort of their desk from their offices, they can be able to log into the portal. They can be able to submit template of audited account, of investment returns, and also of contribution returns, and also attach those supporting documents. And when the document comes here, they are analyzed. So as a result of this, we have been able to enhance the service delivery and ensuring that our stakeholders are not bogged in by wasting time to come here, but at the comfort of their desk, they can be able to submit these returns.
We had one laptop, which was pinned by the pillar on the 13th floor. We had only two
When we came, a lot of the pension schemes were non-public, non-contributory, what we call the pay-as-you-go schemes. Over the years, we have been able to transition all those schemes to contributory schemes, investments and assets, which ensures a sustainable system. When you have the pay-as-you-go system, you are really at the mercy of the purpose of the employer. The employer goes in shop with the the pension. When you have a sustainable system, which is funded and contributory that we have, and then the pension system remains the employer is there. And of course, this has culminated with the last one, the civil service scheme, which from January this year has also moved to the contributory system, the funded scheme, regulated and RBA. So we have closed the loop. We have been able to bring all the pension industry to a sustainable system. Stability, we have ensured stability through what we call risk supervision. We measure the risk of all the schemes we supervise. We have a risk score. That score tells us we're able to average for the whole industry to see how the industry is doing. Over the years, we've been able to progressively reduce this risk score, which corresponds that the industry is stable and becoming more stable. The area that there's a question mark, which is very important, is the area of advocacy, because if you have a pension system, you have people who are saving in that system, can be very stable and sustainable, but the pensions that are getting at the end of the day, adequate. And that I think is a big question mark that the city needs to be addressed as we go forward. I think a lot of the surveys that we have done after that generally show replacement rates between 25 to 40%, which means that when one retires, the pension system is only trying to give income equivalent to less than 40% of what is earning when they were working, which is not adequate, because an adequate pension is living around 60-70% of pre-retirement income. So legacy is an area that still needs a lot of work.
Inadequacy, low contributions, short contribution periods, and a lot of leakages due to early withdrawals because of people.
The informal nature of our labor market has also been a challenge. It's something that we are really working towards addressing, creation of schemes which are targeting the informal sector, which are flexible, which are leveraging the technologies that people can trade with their phones and so on. But the traditional schemes that we caught when we first started the RBA are really the formal sector based schemes. So it's only now that we are getting more and more schemes that target the formal sector. Of course, like other
longer in Kenya, because as people live longer, then they need to plan pensions for longer. That, of course, also affects the adequacy of benefits. I mentioned that we have allowed a lot of different asset classes and introduced a lot of alternative investments, but in the market itself, a lot of these assets are not yet there, or they are very limited amounts. So as much as the regulations allow this diversified investment portfolio, we do find that it's hard to get a lot of these counters on the market. Of course, we also had a challenge of unlimited contributions by employers, particularly in the public sector, while employers fail to remit contributions to the scheme. Therefore, this is a challenge. quite strongly. We must say that the pension industry really proved to be resilient. We shall be looking at going we are going into some of these areas, such as infrastructure, private equity, and so on.
Platforms. Be sure to do that even as we continue.
filing requirements have really helped. Pension fund trustees and their service providers have been able to keep the show on the road by organizing virtual meetings, virtual events of the type we are holding today. Pension scheme annual general meetings have become completely virtual, and indeed we are seeing a significant increase in the participation by members of funds because these are more virtual events now. The pace of digitalization in the pensions industry has increased, right? So we were somewhat behind the curve in the financial services industry, and I believe COVID-19 has seen many of us step up. Thankfully, a move to tax the investment income of retirement benefit schemes was rejected by our National Assembly, and this was really good. And as the CEO said, we're finally seeing the implementation of the public service superannuation scheme, which we hope will be another milestone for this country. So, in spite of the COVID-19 turbulence, total pension assets in the country, as Mr. Mutuku showed again, actually increased and have now passed the 1.4 trillion mark. So overall, we can say, yes, it has been a tough time, but not as bad as we had initially anticipated as the industry. And this, to me, is a testimony to the resilience of the Kenyan economy, as well as the resilience of the pensions industry in this country. But the COVID-19 crisis has exposed some deep gaps in our pension system. And as we build back better, we must address some of these weaknesses. A dictionary definition of resilience is the ability to become strong or successful again after something bad happens, such as this pandemic. Or it can be defined as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity and trauma. So when we talk about building a resilient retirement benefits industry in Kenya and insulating us from future crises, I believe we must take a deeper look at resilience. To me, a resilient retirement benefits system and country and industry is one that is firstly inclusive, secondly adequate, thirdly relevant, fourthly impactful, and fifthly sustainable. And allow me to touch briefly on each of these before I conclude. Our 1.4 trillion pensions industry in Kenya excludes the vast majority of the workforce of our country. We have 16 million Kenyans, or 85% of our workforce, in the informal sector that is not covered at all in our pension sector. 80% of the new jobs in our country are being created in the informal sector. And I would say that someone who is working in the informal sector has as much, if not a greater need, than their salaried counterparts to be protected or be provided for the loss of an income earning capacity when they're no longer able to work in their old age. And COVID-19 to me is actually a trailer to a much deeper crisis that we will face as a country if we don't address this challenge. COVID-19 has actually exposed some of the deep cracks in the social fabric of our country. And within a few days of the pandemic, we found that millions of Kenyans struggle to put food on their table or be able to continue staying in their homes. This is because most of them had virtually near zero savings. And if it was so hard, if it has been so hard to look after our population during this time, can we imagine how much harder it will be? The exponentially much bigger crisis that we will face when these millions of Kenyans drop off the workforce and are no longer, because they are no longer able to work because of old age. We cannot be a resilient pensions industry if we are not an inclusive pensions industry. Now, turning next to those of us who are lucky enough to belong to retirement benefit schemes and be saving, the reality is most of us are not saving enough. And this is why, as the CEO said, The pensions that we are getting are barely replacing 30 to 34% of what we were earning just before our retirement. This is not a good state to be in when the desired ratio is 75 to 80%. Therefore, if we are to generate adequate retirement benefits for Kenyans, we must move to a system where contributions are mandatory. We have a minimum level of contributions that is compulsory, and we have legislation to do this. And whether we like to talk about all this or not, we must tackle this issue of early access to retirement benefits, not preserving retirement benefits during our working lives. And I will say this, we must stop dilly-dallying on the implementation of the National Social Security Fund Act of 2013, because it is in our national interest and for our country and will be good for our nation to implement. Sadly, we continue to struggle to get better tax incentives from our government, with the monetary cap on tax-deductible pension contributions remaining at 20,000 shillings for the 18th year running. Surely we need better. Ladies and gentlemen, a resilient retirement benefit system must also be relevant to the needs of Kenyans. Our pension system, with a singular focus on retirement alone, may not fully resonate with our population and our citizens. I believe Kenyans are aspirational. And yes, they want social protection, but they also want upward social mobility. And I've said this many times, that in order to do this, we should expand our pension system to accommodate wider savings priorities. We are already doing this for post-retirement medical, for housing. We should also do this for saving for education, cash-back mortgages, for example. And the COVID-19 crisis has also underlined the importance of having saving for emergencies. Combining a savings account earmarked for retirement with a savings account for emergencies could make our retirement system much more resilient to future crises. Fourthly, a resilient retirement benefits industry must be one that has impact. An industry that is providing a vital source of long-term domestic capital to build the country, a pensions industry that is investing in the real Kenyan economy, investing in infrastructure, in public-private partnerships, in SMEs, and yes, in the Big Four. And doing this through our asset managers, our investment community, coming up with bankable investment products that protect members' funds and give them a good return whilst we build our nation. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, a resilient retirement benefits industry must be one that is sustainable for all the stakeholders in this industry. A sustainable industry must be one that is trusted. Trust is a very precious commodity, and every provider in this country must ensure that trust in our industry is not derailed in any way. A sustainable pensions industry is one that gives value for money to all its members, but at the same time ensures that industry players, service providers, are able to invest in the good people, the systems, the controls, and the innovations that are necessary to give good value to members of pension funds and ensure that we keep getting better returns for the pensions industry. So, ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 has brought to light that the unexpected can happen. And we should expect the unexpected and not found to be unprepared or underprepared, because that will not be an excuse. And I believe that we have a strong foundation of the first 20 years to build a solid, resilient, inclusive, adequate, relevant, impactful, and sustainable retirement benefits system in Kenya. So as we celebrate the achievements of the first 20 years and congratulate the RBA again, I would like to conclude with the words of John Donne, a famous English poet, who said, "When you are done, you are not done, for there is always more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very kind words, and of course, a challenge to all of us on the saving culture. That is Sandeep Raichura from the Association of. Just a quick one. Sorry about that. Sandeep Raichura from the Actuarial Society of Kenya. Another round of applause there, talking about the unexpected can happen. And it did in 2020, not just for Kenya, but the whole world. But then it's how you come out of it that matters the most. Sandeep has talked about what a resilient and sustainable pension industry looks like. So our next speaker is going to focus on, so then, what are the new frontiers that this industry needs to get into? What new investment products, perhaps, or new waters do we need to start swimming into to make this particular industry more vibrant than it already is? So I'm glad to invite our next speaker, Jonathan Stitchbury, the chairman of the Fund Managers Association, to talk to us about the new investment frontiers for pension funds in the 21st century. A round of applause for Jonathan as he comes onto the podium. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As has been mentioned, my name is Jonathan Stitchbury. I'm the current chairman of the Fund Managers Association. I would also like to join my colleagues here and congratulate the RBA on reaching this historic milestone. The pension sector in Kenya is truly unrecognizable from 20 years ago, and the improvement we've seen has often been as a result of the RBA's actions, efforts, and regulations. On behalf of the fund management industry, I would also like to recognize and thank the authority and its employees, past and present, for your achievements. Well done. The Fund Managers Association, often known as the FMA, is a Kenyan trade association established in 2008 to promote responsible and sustainable asset management. Membership of the association is open to Capital Markets Authority licensed organizations who manage firms on behalf of their clients. Within the pension sector, FMA members manage the bulk of funds, investing institutional and individual investors' funds as well in securities throughout East Africa. And in doing so, FMA members contribute to the growth, development, and sustainability of Kenya's capital markets and its economy. Our motto is integrity for success. And through our various subcommittees, the FMA supports its members by actively engaging with policymakers, regulators, and other stakeholders through discussions and submissions of ideas, proposals, and concerns. These include the raising of ethical standards, the development of new products, implementation of new regulations, and training requirements, etc. The FMA's 15 member firms comprise African Alliance Investment Bank, Apollo Asset Management, Absa Asset Management, Britam Asset Managers, CIC Asset Management, Co-op Investment Services, Dry Associates, Fusion Capital, Gen Africa Asset Managers, Genghis Capital, ICA Line Asset Management, Madison Investment Managers, NCBA Capital, UAP Old Mutual, and my own firm, of which I'm CEO, Sanlam Investments, East Africa Limited. But turning to the panel discussion which will take place shortly today, which will be moderated by the chair of the FMA Stakeholders Committee, Einstein Kahanda, and we'll have three of our senior chief executives on the panel. I'd like to briefly reflect, before they talk, I'd like to briefly reflect on the past, on the journey taken over the last 20 years, and provide some perspectives on the same as we look to the future. Personally, I've had the privilege of working in the retirement benefits sector since 1998. I was involved in working groups almost from the start as the RBA and the retirement benefits rules and regulations came into being. At that time, a number of new fund management companies were established. Some no longer exist, but many others remain familiar. However, one of the main changes that the new regulatory environment introduced was the requirement to appoint both a fund manager and a separate custodian for each pension scheme, and also the requirement for schemes to adhere to the RBA's investment guidelines. Both were controversial at the time. Trustees and members, understandably, were reluctant to hand over control of their assets to untried fund managers. And up until then, trustees were broadly able to invest in whatever they liked, or, as often the case, whatever the CEO of the sponsor wanted. This often resulted in schemes being undiversified, and for example, there were large pension schemes which were almost wholly invested in property. Whilst there is nothing wrong with that asset class, it's certainly not necessarily liquid. Other schemes of listed companies would often be heavily exposed to the shares of the sponsor, meaning that if something went wrong with that company, not only would the employee lose his job, they might also lose a significant portion of their pension. Whilst, of course, many schemes were very well run, there were others where trustees or senior management took advantage of the lack of regulatory oversight for their own personal benefit by investing in ways or with characters who would reward them personally for doing so. So it was against this backdrop that the RBA introduced the investment regulations and guidelines, which for the first time introduced limits on the amounts which could be invested in various asset classes. This was groundbreaking. As I recall, in 2000, the then CEO of the RBA reported that the 50 largest schemes in Kenya had over 50% of their assets in one asset class, property. That was perhaps understandable because for the most part, the only government securities available for investors were mostly 91-day and 182-day treasury bills, whose rates swung violently, which meant that the return of pension schemes were highly volatile from year to year. But it certainly didn't mean that pension schemes were well diversified. So let's fast forward to today. Certainly, levels of diversification have improved, but many challenges remain in the retirement benefits sector, not least the need to improve coverage. But for those lucky people who do have a pension, the situation is immeasurably better than it was 20 years ago. And I think this is largely because of the RBA. Further, schemes are by and large much better run. There's good oversight, trustees are better trained, benefits are better protected, and service providers are more skilled and professional. Today, the fund management industry employs scores of CFA charter holders, whereas when I started in 1998, there was just one Kenyan CFA. And today there are over 100 ASIFA qualified financial analysts working in the fund management industry. A great step forwards. Further, with the support of pension schemes, the government of Kenya was able to successfully introduce and embed a government bond program which persists to this day and allows investors to invest in bonds with maturities up to 30 years. This in turn allows schemes to benefit from long-term regular cash flows. Now this wasn't easy to introduce and there was much skepticism at first, but it is often forgotten that without the support of the pension sector, many of the infrastructure projects which have been undertaken in Kenya over the last 15 years simply wouldn't have happened. Moving to the more recent past, over the last 5 years, it's been especially encouraging to see trustees become more familiar with and start to invest in other emerging asset classes, such as private equity and infrastructure. For the former, the reality is that the majority of businesses in Kenya and around the world are not listed on a stock exchange. And often some of the most exciting growth companies are private. For example, in the US and other developed economies, many pension schemes will have over 20% of their assets invested in the private equity asset class. And this is the reasons include that pension schemes can take a long-term view, and our panel discussion today will no doubt focus on some of the benefits of investing in private equity. Similarly, while pension schemes have been major investors in Government of Kenya infrastructure bonds, again, the long-term cash flow requirements mean that pension schemes are ideally placed to make direct investments into infrastructure projects, which benefit the entire country and us as individuals. These tend to be large, multi-billion but one-off projects and require more funds than any individual scheme might be able to raise by themselves. So it makes sense for schemes to aggregate funds from various pension schemes to make these investments. And I personally am sure that aggregation is the future and will be another focus of our panel discussion today, along with the FMA's support for the Kenya Pension Fund Investment Consortium, or often known as KEPFIC, which has been created for just that purpose. There are, of course, and there will continue to be other new innovations and new products for investors to consider in the years ahead. These can include real assets, commodities, and such like. And the panel may well look to explore these as well. But with these opening comments and remarks, I will close. And I'd like to once again thank the RBA for arranging this conference to celebrate such an important milestone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jonathan. And before we get to our next speaker, just quickly to remind you that we're not just having this conversation here and virtually, we are taking it to our social media platform. So grab your phone, tweet something with the hashtag RBA at 20 or RBA turns 20. Hashtag RBA at 20. I expect to see everyone with their phone. Tweet something. Congratulations, RBA. 20 years is no joke, quite the milestone. And some of the achievements that have been made so far are being talked about here today. So RBA at 20, RBA turns 20. Remember, after the keynote addresses, we will have a panel discussions, and we do not intend for it to be a talk-down kind of conversation. Would love to involve you watching us on KTN News from home, you who've logged on our virtual platforms and on our social media platforms as well. Would love for you to ask any questions with regarding the pension industry. The CEO will also talk about the new products that RBA has come up with in a bid to also just expand their coverage as well. So any questions to any of the panelists, I will be taking them, compiling them, and of course shooting them to our panelists when we get to that point of the conversation. So remember to tweet, ask any questions, any comments. It could be as simple as congratulations. Would be happy to have you engage with us. I'm already seeing a lot of people log on. Remember, www.rba.co.ke if you want to join us virtually, and of course ask questions on our platform, www.rba.co.ke. And remember, even on our social media platforms, it is at RBA Kenya, and on Facebook, Retirement Benefits Authority. Now, our next speaker is going to speak to us about contemporary trends shaping the future of retirement benefits industry. What are the emerging trends that are important for the development of this particular industry, and how do we involve technology to make it seamless and have better systems? Simon Nyakundi, the chairman of the Association of Retirement Benefit Schemes, is now taking the podium to speak to us about the contemporary trends shaping the future of retirement benefits industry. Simon, thank you very much for joining us. A round of applause for him as he takes the podium for his presentation next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kisha. The CEO, RBA, the Chairman, Fund Managers Association, the Actuarial Society of Kenya, Working Party Chairperson, President Sandeep Raichura, members of the press, viewers, my colleagues at ARBS, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
When the regulator calls you, you stop everything and first attend. It gladdens therefore my heart that this morning I was called to celebrate with the RBA the milestone and achievement they've done for the last 20 years. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, allow me first to introduce the Association of Retirement Benefit Schemes of Kenya. The association, as it's called, ARBS, is a not-for-profit organization registered under the Societies Act. ARBS was formed in 1999 and has therefore been in existence for more than 20 years. ARBS was founded by members of the retirement benefit sector with the aim of serving, representing, promoting the interest of retirement benefit industry in Kenya. Therefore, ARBS, together with RBA, have since their formation helped in shaping the path for retirement industry, benefit industry, and we believe together we have made a significant positive contribution to the growth of the retirement benefit industry in Kenya. Most of our efforts jointly so far have been directed towards addressing issues which affect the retirement benefit sector. Over the years, we have made several recommendations that have positively impacted on the retirement benefit industry in Kenya and therefore contributed to the economic growth of this country. Together with RBA and ARBS, we champion good governance, ethics, and integrity in the retirement benefit industry, which has made the Kenyan retirement benefit sector a leader in the region and competitive globally. And because of this, RBA CEO, present and past, have sat in prestigious bodies. What comes to mind is International Organization of Pension Supervisors, where at one point the CEO was the chairperson. And currently, the CEO is the chair of IOPS African chapter. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not mean achievements. Kenya embarked on the reform agenda 20 years ago on the retirement benefit sector. These reforms has given positive results, making the industry grow tremendously. The sector is currently with assets under management of 1.2 billion and is still growing. Some of this is invested across different sectors of the economy and therefore contributing to the well-being of members because of the returns. Ladies and gentlemen, some of the skyscrapers in Nairobi belong to the retirement benefit scheme. Teleposta, for example, Pension Towers, the new CBK Towers, Lonro House in CBD, KCB Towers, Bandari Plaza in Westlands, just to mention but a few. In Eldoret, Mombasa, Nakuru, you will not miss to see footprints of a retirement benefit scheme property. We have had a particular interest of extension to the industry, together with RBA, in Trustee Development Program Kenya, which was developed in 2011. And so far, over 4,500 trustees countrywide have undergone this training since inception in 2011. In terms of extending coverage, RBA was a pioneer in a famous product called Mbao Pension Plan within the micro-pension space, so they were the pioneers in that area, which tapped into the informal sector, which is being emulated now by many players in the industry, leveraging on mobile penetration and high technology in Kenya. So ladies and gentlemen, what are the contemporary trends that will be shaping the future of the retirement benefit industry going forward? I know this has been alluded to by the CEO RBA, coverage. Kenyan coverage is still very low at around 22%, the last I checked in 2019. This will need to extend coverage. And there are many ways or many other areas you will be seeing, especially new products in this area. For example, if I'm a dairy farmer and I take my milk delivery to KCC or Brookside, you will see a check-off system saying my deliveries, when I'm being paid, part of it should go to my retirement savings. If I'm a maize farmer, for example, some of those deliveries to National Cereal and Produce Board, I might have to do a check-off system to say part of it would go to my retirement savings. Once then we increase coverage, the next big thing will be adequacy of those benefits, and this has been alluded by able panelists. Sandeep has already alluded to that, and the CEO RBA said about that. We will need, if for example, you will be earning 100,000 before you retire, just as you retire, you need to earn around 70,000. That means your lifestyle will still be maintained. But currently, we are doing around less than 40%. And therefore, we need to increase the adequacy of those benefits. What other things as the industry grows will shape the landscape? Our stock market is not deep enough. There are few stocks that all of us would like to invest in, and probably it will be better if we see more IPOs. So you'll see a push towards many companies desiring or incentive to list, so that we will get more investment options in our investment universe. Whether it will be in the areas of real estate investment trusts, whether development or investment REITs. This has also been said. PE funds, we would see the entry of more PE funds so that the retirement benefit sector will have more products. In terms of technology, yes, we have deployed some systems in the retirement benefit sector, but these will need to be upgraded to accommodate the new products and new efforts that are being made. And therefore, you would see members demanding for member choices on the investment option. So if you are a risk taker like myself, you will be put in a more aggressive one. But if you are risk averse, then you will choose an option which is moderate or less risky. Currently, we have members and trustees self-service portals, and you'll see this happening. And what will happen is an upgrade on the dashboards that as you log in, you'll be able to see, so that you'll make informed decision. Probably something that will tell you if you retired today, what would be your fund value and how much would be your pension. As we deploy these systems, then the challenge will be cybersecurity threats. And with the Data Protection Act, we will need to enhance our systems to be able to protect the data we have so that it doesn't land in the wrong hands. What about in terms of the academic sector? Yes, financial literacy in schools will need to be inculcated, and we might need to relook at our curriculum. Any school-going child who is old enough to go to boarding, they need to be taught how to handle and manage money, and saving will be part of that. So that will be implemented most likely across primary, secondary, and university, so that we change the saving culture of this country, so that we increase the saving culture. What about the policy shift? I foresee a policy shift. We are currently on, in terms of tax, we are on exempt, and tax. What do I mean? Exempt contribution, exempt investment income, and tax the benefit. A research needs to be carried on this area to see whether that is sustainable, or has it outlived its usefulness, so that, and what will be good for the members. Because if you look at the tax-free contribution, it has been static for too long, and it's not indexed to inflation. On the other end, what other policy shift do I see? The Retirement Benefit Act, Table G, which prescribes the quantitative limits that will need to, schemes will be guided when they are investing. There'll also be more research on this area to see whether it's time to change to what is commonly known as prudent man policy, where trustees are given a bit of leeway as long as they do not take too much risk, as long as they can be able to secure members, but with broad guidelines on this area. Ladies and gentlemen, my dad, late dad, was a man of few words. And because he's my hero and role model, I will stop there. Thank you so much.
Are you also a man of few words like your father? We wonder. Thank you very much, Simon. A round of applause again for him. And that closes our first session of the opening remarks. And let's just quickly go over what we've already seen. Of course, the opening remarks from the CEO, Nzomo Mutuku, will still be with us on the next session of the panel discussion. Sandeep Raichura also spoke to us about how COVID-19 has impacted the industry and how resilient systems are built in an industry like this. What's the way forward? Sandeep Raichura is from the Actuarial Society of Kenya and also the Group CEO of Zamara. We also had Jonathan from the Fund Manager Association. He's the chairman of the Fund Managers Association. Jonathan Stitbury talked to us about new investment frontiers for pension funds in the 21st century. What are the investment trends of the pension funds over the years? And of course, what other alternative investments areas are there for pension funds? And of course, finally, we had Simon Nyakundi from the Association of Retirement Benefit Scheme. He's really touched on a lot of things. And what has piqued my mind is what is mentioned on financial literacy and whether perhaps it is time to inculcate it to our education curriculum. It is also something we'll be talking about on the panel on the benefits of growing a saving culture in the country. So then, of course, let me take it back to some housekeeping and where you can find us just before we get to the panel discussion. Remember, hashtag RBA at 20, hashtag RBA turns 20. It's already trending on Twitter and other social media platforms, so don't be left behind. Do join us for that conversation. And of course, we're also giving you a chance to ask any questions, any comments, be part of this conversation because this is happening because of you. Join us on all the platforms, and remember, you can also log on to the RBA platform to join us for the virtual conference. This is a virtual conference, so of course, due to COVID-19 and the health guidelines, we could not have everyone here. And the RBA was kind enough to ensure that we get in as many people as possible to join the conversation. So do get us on www.rba.co.ke. There'll be a link for you there where you can also engage with us, ask questions, give comments. You can pose any of your questions to any of our panelists that I'm about to introduce. And remember, on Twitter, at RBA Kenya. So far, we've closed the first part for the keynote address and the opening remarks. I want us now to embark on the panel discussion that will really cover an array of topics with regards to the pension sector. The CEO talked to us about how far we have come, what the journey has been like for RBA. But now we want to take a look at where are we now? What are some of the innovations that we need to put in place to ensure vibrancy in this particular sector? What is the future of this sector? Simon has also alluded to the concerns around the numbers in coverage. How do we ensure that we net as many people as possible in these schemes? We have the best of brains, I imagine, in this particular sector, so they will be helping us break down some of these issues and giving us some great insights on the future of this industry. And with that, I'd like to reintroduce my panelists for the next bit of the conversation. And of course, I will start with the CEO, Nzomo Mutuku. And before you go, Jonathan, of course, I should mention Jonathan Stitchberry is the chairperson of the Funds Manager Association. Unfortunately, he has to leave us. I don't know whether you have any final remarks for us. There's a mic there for you so that you don't just leave us like that. Leave us with something, Jonathan.
Leave you with something. I would just like to reiterate again, on behalf of all the fund managers in the Fund Managers Association, our congratulations to the RBA on this very special day. 20 years is a long time. It's a significant milestone, and a huge amount has been achieved over the last 20 years, and we're pleased to have been with you on the journey, and we look forward to developing the industry over the next 20 years. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for joining us. Unfortunately, we have to let him go, but he leaves us with a great talent from FMA as well. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for being with us here today. A round of applause for him as he leaves. And of course, reintroducing which one? So are you changing? Okay. Great. So let me reintroduce my panelists. My apologies for that. Some housekeeping a bit. CEO, once again, thank you for being with us here. I believe you have a lot to talk to us about when we get to the panel. Nzomo Mutuku is the CEO of the Retirement Benefits Authority. Sandeep Raichura is still here. He's the CEO of Zamara Group. Thank you for staying with us. I believe you still have more to talk to us about. And Einstein Kihanda also takes it up. I think you can just move here. From Jonathan, he's from Fund Managers Association. Thank you very much for being with us here today. And the only lady on the team here, I think you can just move closer. Jane Gitao from the Association of Retirement Benefits Scheme, also joining us on this panel. We'll also have a number of people who will also be contributing to the topic. We have Abed Mureithi from the Actuarial Society of Kenya, who will also be joining us, just talking to us about giving us comments and insights on the topics involved here. And from the Fund Managers Association, Nicholas Itondeka, the CEO of Cop Trust Investment Services Limited, will also be talking to us about, will also be giving us insights on some of the topics here. And they're just here, I think, I don't know if the camera can just zoom in, and perhaps Nicholas and Abed can join us on the stage. Thank you very much. A round of applause as they come onto the stage. Nicholas Itondeka is the CEO of Cop Trust Investment Services Limited, and Abed Mureithi is also from the Actuarial Society of Kenya. Other names that will also be talking to us, I think Ezekiel Masharia will be talking to us at some point from the Actuarial Society of Kenya, Anthony Mwithiga, CEO ABSA Asset Management Limited, who's here with us, thank you very much, and Patrick Karaoke, CEO, Gen Africa Asset Managers. We have a great pool of minds, and I think years and years of experience. So I imagine from the list I have here, we have the right minds to talk to us about some of the topics we are about to delve into on the pension industry here. So thank you very much. Remember, those joining us on the virtual platforms, you can log in and put in your questions as the conversation continues. www.rba.co.ke. I'd be glad to pose some of the questions for you as we continue with the conversation. Thank you very much, gentlemen and lady, for being with us here. I think I will start with the CEO. You started by taking us through the journey that has been there for the past 20 years. So where are we now?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question, and good morning, everyone, again. Where are we now? We are at 1.4 trillion shillings in terms of assets, which is a great achievement, even given what happened last year with the COVID-19. We have a great diversified investment portfolio. We have around 44% of our assets in fixed income securities, around 19% or 18% in real estate. another 17% in what we call guaranteed funds, which is insurance companies, maybe 14% in quoted equities, and then smaller amounts in different other investments, including the alternative investments that I talked about. We have a great industry with all kinds of products and schemes, which cater for everybody. In many countries you find only one kind of scheme and so on. But here, we have defined benefits, we have defined contribution, we have pension, we have provident, we have umbrella, we have IPPs. Whatever suits you, you can get it in our market. And then, of course, we have all these great professionals who are providing service to the scheme. As has been mentioned, when we started, we had one CFA. We had around 2 or 3 actuaries, including Raichura and DPR, but now we have over 50, I think, or probably more qualified actuaries in the market. So we have come a long way, and I think we're in a very good place to tackle the next 20 years.
You also talked about new products that RBA is offering now. One, to just make it a bit more vibrant and beneficial to its members, and two, to try and increase, the number of people who are taking up this. Talk to us about that.
Yes, as you say, for retirement, there are also other things that would be of concern to you. I'll just take 2 examples, medical and housing. As I mentioned earlier, medical is normally a big expense for elderly persons. And when we went out and did what we call a pensioner survey, and we interviewed people who had retired in the past and asked them how they were doing and what are their challenges, many of those who were there told us, yeah, we are getting our pension and all this, but medical is a big challenge. There are a number of aspects to that challenge. One aspect was whether you have the funds to get medical cover. Another aspect was, even if you have the funds, can you afford the medical covers which are in the market? And then another aspect was, if you're at a certain age, you might not even get the cover even if you have the money and you can afford, because sometimes you'd be locked out on basis of age. So to address these challenges, that's where we came up with the Post-Retirement Medical Fund. Now, what the Post-Retirement Medical Fund does is that it enables you to save for your medical in retirement while you're still working. So that addresses the first challenge. Now you have the money because you have been saving over your working life. So when you reach retirement, the money is there. And then the second challenge of can you afford is addressed because it is now the pension scheme which goes out and gets the medical cover for all its members. And because it's going as a scheme, it has the power to get good prices. But when you are alone there and walking into a place to get cover, you will not get a good price. But when it's a scheme doing it for you, it's able to negotiate the best price. So that addresses the second challenge. And also the third challenge, because once you get into this system, you cannot be locked out on the basis of age. But when you are already old and you walk in, then they can refuse to give you cover. But if you have been there all along, then you cannot be removed from the system. So the Post-Retirement Medical Fund is a great product. It is picking up momentum. It's really going to help our members when they reach retirement. Yes.
Great. And I'm sure there are a lot of questions around that. I'll come back to you with that. Isa and Kihanda, I want you to give us your opening remarks. Coming from the Fund Managers Association, and Jonathan has talked about, the direction the sector should be taking and new things we should be considering. But looking at the pension industry itself, the way it is, as fund managers, are we making progress? Is it good progress? And what are the gaps that we need to fill to better the industry?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think, first of all, is also, of course, to acknowledge the significant growth that we've seen. And what it has also done is to, the coming to life of the RBA basically brought structure to the pension industry. And one of the things that's also very important is to give confidence and stability. Because one of the key requirements of a pension fund, for instance, is to have a fund manager, to have an administrator, to have a custodian. So it makes sure that there is adequate protection of the benefits and the funds that are being invested. So in terms of the areas, or one area that I think is important to recognize is that the growth that we have seen, the 1.4 trillion that we're talking about, that growth in assets under management has not seen a commensurate growth in investment opportunities. Right. By this I mean the traditional investments. For instance, the listed equities, government securities. And what has therefore happened is that we have seen, in terms of investment trends, a lot of the focus has been largely on government securities. And you will see that in the distribution of assets in terms of the allocation. As an industry, therefore, over the years, what we have seen is significant development of capacity among fund managers to analyze investment opportunities in listed equities. But of course, as these funds grow, it means that we now have to develop capacity as fund managers to also be able to analyze alternative investments. So that, I think, is one gap that I think we need to address, and we are addressing as an industry, because we now need to look at other areas of investments that pension funds can invest in. We have seen examples, for instance, in other countries and other jurisdictions, where pension funds invest directly in infrastructure like roads and bridges and other those kind of instruments. So I think that is one area that as fund managers, we need to develop the skills, the knowledge, the capacity to be able to participate in such investment opportunities, because what it also means is that we are actually making a direct investment in the country using the resources that are available for us as fund managers, and also delivering a return to the members of those schemes. Right. So yeah, I think that's one very important area that I see.
You took my next question off my mouth, because the government is very keen on infrastructural projects right now, and extra keen on PPPs. So then how do we come in to support such projects? Thank you very much for answering it before I ask. Jen Gitao, from the Association of Retirement Benefits Scheme. Simon has run us through what are some of the challenges, what direction we need to look at, and the new trends. But something key to note is the coverage. Not a lot of people are taking up these products, as good as they are, as flowery as they look. Why is that, and how? What efforts do we need to put in place to increase these numbers?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm really excited to be in this session first. Please allow me a moment to celebrate, because I witnessed the birth of RBA, not as a child, but as a practitioner. So I am a witness to what has been achieved. And addressing to the issue of coverage, there is a lot that we need to do. First of all, if we do not take action, we are going to expose our nation to the issue of older persons' burden as we progress. As we are talking about RBA and coverage, I would imagine by the time RBA was born, whoever was retiring then, if still living, is about 80 years. And this segment will continue growing. What we need to do, according to my thoughts, is, growing old is a process, but preparing for it needs to start very early. So we need to have systems that are addressing the growth of savings in this sector, so that we also rescue our government from bearing the old age burden. Let's start with the young people, so that in the next 20, 30 years, by 2050, we'll have resolved the issue of the financial burden of the old people or the retirees. Thank you. I'm sure there are many questions to come. I have a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can also get the opening remarks from Nicholas there. I think you have a mic. Great. Yes. CEO, Corp Trust Investment Services Limited. Just for the sake of our viewers, Nicholas Ithondeka is the CEO, Corp Trust, right?
Correct.
Investment Services Limited. I almost thought I was wrong.
Okay.
Einstein has started us off on some of the frontiers we need to be thinking about in terms of partnerships. I'd really like you to also take it up from there on what new trends should we be considering in terms of investments.
Thank you, Akisa. And just before I start, I think I happen to be one of those people who, by the time they walked into this industry, they had the benefit of meeting a highly regulated industry, which has been well run. So Mr. Nzoma Mutuko and the RBA team, we really congratulate you for the extreme and wonderful work you've done. As I mentioned earlier, by the time I joined the industry, I think we had about 5-6 years, or at least I hope it is evident from my face. I'm not too old as you may put it. So in terms of the market, Akisa has really developed. I walked into this market when we used to have the regulator do the forums. And I remember you used to go to Sari, I'm sure you remember the times. And RBA used to be the one driving that agenda and used to have all sorts of exhibitions. Fast forward, 5-6 years later, these exhibitions have been run by the industry players. So it is a true testimony of what they even did in the early years just to spearhead the industry. So jumping back to my forte, which is mainly investments, as you've put it, Akisa, I'm the CEO of Coptrust Investment Services. I am privileged to be the team leader there. And we have seen the industry grow in terms of fund value, as has been mentioned and been passed across by the chairman and also the CEO. We are now sitting about 1.4 trillion. So in terms of quantum, we are no longer a small number. We are constantly chasing yields in terms of trying to improve the benefits and the interest for the pensioners. Anne is talking about 20 years ago, people are still alive, and of course, we pray that that maintains the case. So what we are struggling with and what we are looking forward to is mainly opening up investment avenues. And one of the things that I would want to mention here is how RBA has been instrumental in opening up the available investment class as we've progressed on. If you backtrack 6 years back, 10 years back, you clearly see every time there's a need to open up an asset class, RBA is there trying to push through the budget, trying to open up the framework for that asset class, and it is opened up across the last couple of years, opened up into derivative markets, opened up into public-private partnership, as you mentioned, is opened up into private equity. We now have those asset classes on the investment guidelines, Appendix G, as you may call it. So now moving forward again, Akisa, which is mainly what Anstin, CEO of ICA Asset Managers, talked about, the numbers are becoming huge. 1.4 trillion, we can no longer ignore. Unfortunately, the assets, capital market assets, still remain about the same in terms of listed companies. Is not growing as fast as the pension assets. And there is need, of course, to expand into alternative investments. And the RBA has provided that framework. And as we move forward now, they've done it in a way that it's even left them to the market players to find a way of formulating how that should look like. And we are in forums where we sit discussing with government. There's a whole department set up by the government called PPP department, which is able to help us walk that journey. And I think what you're looking for as players is to see, as Anstin put it, is to see our local pension funds be the one driving infrastructure. As it stands right now, we were hosting in 2019, we were hosting almost close to 50 pension schemes from all over the globe who are willing to come and invest in infrastructure here. And Sandeep will tell you that journey quite well. So we are actually now looking forward to see our local investment pension schemes take up that role, be it roads, be it hospitals, be it just general infrastructure, for them to be able to move into the next set of investments. Thank you.
Great. Taking us through the journey, I like that. Thank you very much, Nicholas. Abed, are there any new strategies you think that we can adopt moving forward? Because Sandeep started by telling us the impact that COVID-19 has had in this particular industry. So then, in terms of building resilience and just ensuring that sustainability through and through, are there any new things you can think about? And of course, give us your opening remarks as well.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think to begin with is just to congratulate the RBA. This is a very a long journey that they have had, but very, very transformational. And it's just to thank the CEO and the RBA team for the tremendous work. I think just to mention, the actuarial profession has really benefited from from the RBA initiatives. I believe part of the reason we are now about 50 actuaries in the market is largely because the support of the regulators and one key one being the Retirement Benefits Authority. So just to touch on in terms of from the actuarial profession, what had been touched on by Sandeep, I think he had mentioned a bit about the COVID and its impact. Right. And one of the things, of course, that we noted at that point, that very month when the curfew was announced and that kind of thing, we actually saw a drop in returns of more than 20% in the pension industry. Fortunately, of course, towards the end of the year, end of 2020, there was recovery in the market and that kind of thing. Right. But nevertheless, it created a new thinking. What other opportunities are there? I think it has been mentioned by Nicholas around alternative investment opportunities. I think that is one key area. I think maybe there's still a lot of opportunity. We are still seeing a lot of international players investing in Kenyan opportunities, which local pension schemes have the muscle and ability to invest into such opportunities, but perhaps have been a bit not as risk aggressive. Mm-hmm. We think there is a lot of opportunity, yes, for development finance. 1.4 trillion is not a small amount of money. It's not pocket change, though we would hope it would be ours, but nevertheless, it's no pocket change. So there is a lot of opportunity for the pension industry to drive growth, to drive development, and that kind of thing. There is also the aspect that was touched on by the CEO around post-retirement medical, and I think rightly from the RBA's view, in terms of it being a very significant need, post-retirement medical cover. And I think it's been very supportive. It's actually not a very old idea for the industry, but to find that RBA were at the forefront. In fact, very interestingly, they didn't have the initial framework, but they were very willing to hear and to accommodate views by the actuarial profession, by industry players. And we are seeing a lot of uptick in terms of that. I think also just to mention, there's a lot of forward thinking in the RBA. I think recently there was the derivatives products that now have already been captured under the RBA guidelines. We also aware about the recent securities lending and borrowing products that are being offered now under CDSC. And we understand RBA is quite at the forefront of seeing how that can be accommodated in the pension industry. So there is a lot of forward thinking, we would say, coming from the RBA, and very open to listening to ideas. I think it's very welcome that a lot of times, it's always about the associations being able to engage with the RBA. Right. But I think the sentiment also is that even at individual organizational levels, there is always that open engagement that happens with RBA. And I think this is all geared, of course, towards improving the pension industry. Maybe just on a final note is just to note there is a very huge informal sector. Still, perhaps maybe industry players have not yet cracked how to really penetrate in the informal sector. Right. And we are largely focused on where there is maybe easier money to be made by commercial players. But the informal sector still remains quite underrepresented in the pension space. And perhaps, of course, we have seen some of the administrators launching digital products, which can be easily taken up by the informal sector. I think it's still an area for exploration. And I think it's just to also note quite well that the RB has actually engaged the industry players around informal sector. What is the kind of support that they can give to be able to increase coverage? I think those would be my few remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I'll bring it back to you, Sandeep, since we're talking about building resilience, and you started us off with this conversation. COVID, I imagine, is one of the things we'd call a black swan event. We didn't see it coming, so we were all groping in the dark, from businesses to the government, and it's world over. It's not just Kenya. So in future, how do we build systems that will thrive even under such circumstances?
It's a pretty good question, Akisa. And so what I would say is that if I look at the Kenyan situation, yes, this COVID-19 pandemic caught us all off guard, right? But within a very short period of time, everybody collectively was able to get things moving, to get the show back on the road, right? So there was the initial shock, but then there was proactive action taken. I talked about the regulator coming in, offering more flexibility. Yeah. So rather than having pension funds starting to fold because of excessive payouts or suspension of contributions, the regulator brought in that flexibility that you can have a temporary suspension of contributions. There were, the issue about, reporting deadlines, so there were extensions given for those. So all of these things really help in salvaging a situation. Now, as I said, the unexpected will happen again. Yes. I mean, it's almost guaranteed to happen. I hope, it's probably another 100 years away, but how well prepared are we for this, right? So we need to ensure that the systems, processes that we have will give the confidence to Kenyans that you can save, you must save, you can save, because if you have a saving, you are more resilient. So in fact, we need to break this cycle of successive generations of Kenyans not saving. And a key message that we need to get out is that we have a very solid regulatory framework in Kenya, probably the best in Africa. The pension system that we have here is one of checks and balances, where, every person saving is almost guaranteed that their money is secure and safe, right? Because you've got, different players, you've got pension fund administrators who hold records, you have investment managers who invest the money, but they don't hold the money. The money is held by independent custodians, right? So it's a system of checks and balances that should give a lot of confidence. So I feel in the first 20 years, we have accomplished that. We have accomplished that this is a solid system, it works. And now for the next 20 years, the focus will be, okay, so how do we get more Kenyans? How do we provide this education, create that awareness, right? And again, this is where the regulator has played an important role. I mean, a lot of the efforts on retirement literacy have been driven by the RBA, right? So this is commendable, but there's a gigantic gap in financial literacy, in people understanding pensions or insurance, or the need to protect themselves. So I feel it's a collective effort that all of us need to make, so that when the next crisis comes, we are very well prepared.
Right? Great. CEO, I have a lot of questions to you with regards to these new products. I've seen a number on Twitter where someone has asked that this 40% mortgage, can they take it to not buy a house but build one? Buy a plot, build a house. And then there's another question here from Jackson Muli who says, what plans are underway for the regulator to strive and push for the government to honor and reward citizens with some pension kitty at their old age, irrespective of their working life career? That's from Jackson Muli on our virtual setting.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for those questions. And let me also thank the many people who have seen on both Twitter and even in the Zoom for their congratulatory messages and warm wishes. Thank you very much. We really appreciate that as RBA. On the mortgage, yes, that's another innovation which we have brought. That's actually the most recent innovation that we have brought to the industry. And what this does, it enables you to use some of the money that you have saved in your pension scheme to buy a house. And yes, it's limited to 40% of what you have accumulated, and also to 7 million. So you can't go beyond 7 million. And yes, it is limited to buying a completed house and not to building a house. Now, why would you do that? Because, a lot of Kenyans own plots. Kenyans are very entrepreneurial, and they would want to build their own homes.
We are obsessed with buying plots.
Yes,
no?
Exactly. The reason is that this mortgage was introduced consciously knowing that we are violating one of the key principles, and that is that this money should be for retirement. And as Sandeep mentioned, lack of preservation is one of the drivers of low replacement rates and inadequacy of pensions. So anytime you introduce a leakage where we are letting people get money out before retirement age, we have to be very careful that whatever noble purpose that we want them to use this money for is achieved. In this case, that noble purpose is getting a home. Because what we are saying is, it's good for you to be able to get a home even before retirement, so that even when you reach retirement, that's not going to be a concern. Because the last thing you want is when you're retired to be having the landlord coming to remove the door from your house and those kind of things.
Right.
So it's very important that this objective of the house is what is done. Now, if you open up for construction and so on, it's impossible to monitor or to verify that is actually happening. I mean, trustees will not have capacity to go out there into the field and see whether a member is actually building the house, or has he taken the money and used it for, he has had a party, or he has married another wife or something like that. So it is just to protect us, to make sure that we are not compromising the ultimate objective of the scheme, which is pension in retirement. But of course, once we have settled down with this one of buying completed houses, our structures are in place, we shall look and see whether we can now expand and also allow construction. The second question on the pension, yes, the government program is already there. The new Jamii program, where the government does a stipend to elderly persons, is already in place. And it was amended. Initially, it used to target only poor households, but a few years ago, a year or two ago, it was amended so that all those above, 70, are eligible for this stipend. So that is there. But this is really a minimal amount, which is supposed to make sure that one is not in absolute poverty when one is old. But it's not going to be enough for you to replace your income in retirement. So you still have to do your own saving, and that is what we are saying. You have to save adequately so that you can get the money in retirement. Allow me to answer a question I've just seen on
from
one of the
Jane
platforms.
Watiki?
Yes, I've seen from Jane. She's asking about KRA and IRA.
Yes.
I mean KRA and RBA registration. And what she's asking is, can we harmonize so that we don't have sort of dual registration? Actually, what happened, of course, before RBA came, schemes could apply to KRA for income tax incentives, which we mentioned earlier. And then when RBA came, it's like we had this dual where you are getting two certificates. But over the years, we have been able to harmonize a lot. We have removed all the non-tax issues from the Income Tax Act because issues of supervision and regulation are under RBA. So the first stop for any scheme is to get the RBA certificate. Once you go, and income tax registration is voluntary, it's not a must, whereas RBA registration is a must. So if you want to get the tax incentives, then you go to KRA and you show them the RBA certificate, and then they will not ask you anything else to do with anything other than the tax issues. So it's not that it's a cumbersome process. Once you get the RBA certificate, the income tax certification is more of a formality, so that you can enjoy the tax benefits.
Just curious, how has the reception been on the mortgage so far?
Mortgage,
excited about it? Are they?
There's a lot of excitement and interest from members, and everywhere we go, we get a lot of questions and commendations for having brought that product, because people are very keen on getting homes. In terms of implementation, it was done last year, and there's a 1-year period for schemes to make the necessary amendments, which is ending in September. So that is when we'll start seeing the actual take-up of actual houses. But just to mention, to make it easier for the schemes to make these amendments, we have done a template which is on our website. So scheme trustees can go there and use that template to do it very easily. And then they submit to us. We give the go-ahead. And then from September, the members can start enjoying that benefit. Yeah.
Einstein, back to you. And I'll just pick it up from where you left on infrastructure. But traditionally, we have been investing in, traditional assets, stocks, bonds, real estate. Now we are talking about diversifying. What other new asset classes should we be thinking about right now?
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. I think, other new asset classes coming up, and I think which also thankfully, the RBA has already allowed in the investment guidelines, like private equity, where you're investing in funds that invest in private businesses. And that helps in terms of also being able to further diversify the investment portfolios. And going further to the earlier point I raised about capacity. So what as fund managers we've also been doing is to also enhance our ability to analyze how those private equity funds are structured, the portfolio companies in that in that private equity fund, how their decision-making processes, all the projected returns, the kind of fees that they are charging. So all these are areas that, again, as fund managers, we are developing the capacity to be able to analyze so that we are able to bring it to the trustees as an investment opportunity. We are also looking at, I think that was already mentioned, derivatives, again, are also allowed. We also have securities and lending, borrowing. So I think maybe the point I would also like to make is that as a regulator, I think the RBA has also been very insightful and helpful in terms of being able to engage the industry players in terms of understanding what these investment avenues are, and therefore incorporating them in the investment guidelines to make it easier for us to be able to make these investments on behalf of our clients. So one of the areas that we've been working with our trustees is also how to ensure that within the investment policy statements that determine how we make investments for our clients, that these investment instruments are actually allowed and they can then be able to make those investment decisions. So there's a lot that can be done. I already talked about infrastructure investments, so that's an area that, again, we are also exploring quite significantly so that, ultimately we can be able to put these investments in place. And another point I should also mention, we talked about real estate, but beyond that is also what you call real estate investment trusts. And these are basically collective, pools of funds that invest in real estate. As opposed to brick and mortar, as in buying a building, you can actually invest in a fund that invests in property. And we have a listed real estate investment trust, and there are also others coming to the market. This is another area, another investment avenue that can be explored in order to further enable the funds to diversify their investment portfolios. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Jen, we've talked about, calling on to people to invest, save first before invest. We're talking about issues of coverage. But among the biggest concerns from Kenyans is why one would prefer to perhaps put their money in their house or a chama. One, the transparency, and two, how do you convince me that this organization or this scheme will not collapse and they'll go away with my money? And that has been a big problem for a very long time. What are your thoughts around that? And how do we need to package this message for the masses?
Thank you. I'll address the concern about reliability, or how we are able to convince new members or people wishing to start the journey of saving for retirement that retirement schemes are solid and are there to last. First, this is an opportunity also to actually applaud the Retirement Benefits Authority, because going by the trend, 20 years of being tested in terms of being grounded and being an able regulator, which is also accompanied by growth, really is a confirmation by itself. So the structures that have been put in place by RBA are so solid, very reliable, and they even have a way of making sure that the members' funds are protected. I see a regulator that really gives the assurance to the market. In fact, at one time, the masses have no idea of the difference between RBA and the service providers because they have established a very firm foundation, a basis of trust. So that is 20 years of testing surely is good enough. And RBA, I can tell you, is forging forward, even in terms of the new areas that RBA is venturing into, the post-retirement medical fund. To me, it is progression from just leaving the members at age 60, but they are now having a plan to progress with them from 60 until the time you exit from this world by providing the product. So I can tell the members not to have any element of doubt because they can just look at statistics and they'll be able to progress on. I would wish to talk more about the space of post-retirement medical fund. When you do the next round, please.
No, please do. Please do.
Okay, thank you. This is what I love most, and what is my cause for celebration this time round. Because the first 20 years we have worked on preparing the member to save for retirement. But now, through RBA, we are going to the next space of following the retiree from 60 up to whatever time they will pass on. And that means it's by looking at their health.
Yes.
So what I can say is, first of all, for RBA, Hongera, well done. But the journey is not yet. In fact, it is just starting. Because now we need to understand this retiree, what are we talking about? So we are getting into another space of understanding the retiree in the 60s to 100 and there beyond. So for the RBA, please, I think you also need now to extend your scope in terms of having regulations or having your supervision to understand the needs of this older person because you have entered into that space. And particularly, I would make a request that we look at the policies that we have in place. How are they likely to impact the lives of the retiree after 60? And I have some examples. Today we are celebrating the 20 years, just 3 days after the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And that is a day that happens every 15th of June. So because now we will be dealing with the older persons, we also need to indulge in understanding or creating awareness to the masses of the retiree, and looking at the policies, are they likely to perpetuate abuse for the retirees? What do I mean? I even have a practical maybe a policy or an act which I think to me may be perpetuating elderly abuse in an economic way. First, abuse is the failure to, maybe that repeated act or single act, or failure to have, to take an action that can prevent the older persons, and let's replace with retirees, life and their health. So we have the Finance Act 2020-2021, which reintroduced the taxation of the persons in the, who are accessing their ransom. Right. Earlier on, it was tax-free. RBA, it may not be, maybe you are doing it, but your work is also being affected by other players. And that is why you also need to work toward harmony. Is the act or the actions or the policies that are coming in place affecting your good work? 20 years of work, 20 years of accumulating 1.4. But another policy comes which is perpetuating an abuse to your client who is now in retirement. We have been persuading the retirees to leave their deferred contributions up to 65 so that they get them tax-free. We wake up a day when tax is introduced. Honestly, that is causing pain to the retirees. And I am making this submission now not as a practitioner, but as a specialist who has done aging studies, that is called gerontology. So I understand very well the space of the retiree. So That is one of them. I have a second one. Abuse, again, is failure to take action or appropriate action that can cushion the retiree at that time. Let me look at the policy space. We had the NSSF Act, which the good intention was to make sure that we have covered nearly everyone to be saving for retirement. But I think more than close to 2013, and now it is close to 10 years, 8 years and above. That has not been instituted. So what does it mean? Somebody who by now would have managed to save for their retirement and not get into poverty is retiring into poverty because of failure to implement an action that should be taken for that. So I am using also this celebration to be able to also create the awareness of the likely policies that we may have in this country that are going to inflict abuse, injury into the retirees.
Great.
Can I go to that?
No, we will come back. We will come back with that. I'd like to give the others a chance to talk. And you really, truly are passionate about that. Thank you for educating us on that. There's some things you've mentioned even I wasn't aware about. So Jane, thank you. When we get back, you will start from where you've left off when you come back on the third round. Nicholas, the liquidity challenge is huge in this particular sector. Talk to us about that.
Okay. No. Thank you, Akisa, for giving me the opportunity once more. I think I'm critical by Anne's proposals, which is quite informative, as you've acknowledged. And I think the question you're asking also points to that direction. Yes. And first of all, if you want to see testimony of when someone has done his job well, is look at the people he's meant to oversee. So when you look at RBA and the way they are the regulator, and so I'm not saying this for my license, it's really because I have seen it, is look at the players they've been licensing and how they've been able to come together and form associations. All these associations you're seeing here, Fund Managers Association, Actuary Society of Kenya, Association of Retirement Benefit Scheme, were non-existent. But they have come up so strongly and they're able to push their agendas as one industry or as one sector, and they're able to drive it forward. Now, back to your question, Akisa, is liquidity. And I like Anne's articulation about you are forcing someone, or you are recommending someone to wait for 65 because it's tax exempt. And then in between there, at 63, 64 years age, then tax is introduced, and the 2-3 years of wait just disappear. And we almost have the same scenario when it looks at defined contribution schemes, whereby the government keeps on opening up and closing access of money. And at the tail end of it is where myself and Einstein and fund managers sit, which is once you have liquidity challenges where things can pop up in between. If you have, for example, a billion, and in between there may be a change of regulation within 2-3 years, which frees up another half of the portfolio. Then the policy and analogy to try and invest in the future, which is where we are moving to, especially because of the public-private PPPs, as you may call it, or private equity, which is mainly long-term in nature, becomes a bit diluted. And you will find that most of the fund managers will then try and be over-conservative because they still have the risk, and the trustees as well, who have the risk of that liquidity challenge or liquidity event, as it may be. Of course, we understand where it comes from. It's passed through proposals which are deliberated by the members of parliament, which of course are the lawmaking of the country, so we also have to respect that. But the liquidity challenge, Akisa, is actually there because of that investment horizon. At the tail end of it caps the growth. The money available to invest into longer term investments, which is where infrastructure sits, which is where private equity products sit, becomes then a challenge. But of course, going forward, we'll try and lobby as much as we can through the RBA and other regulators to try and maintain that kind of liquidity. Yeah.
Great, thank you. How do we encourage young people to start saving early? How do we enhance the saving culture in this country, Abid?
Thank you once again. I think the first thing we usually say is people don't plan. But if they are made aware that they need to plan, I think is a very big aspect, awareness. So people only really become aware about pension and pension issues when they have started working. And if their employer is actually having a pension arrangement on behalf of staff. So one of the challenges is just awareness. And when does that awareness take place? The earlier, the better, definitely. I will take, for example, there are some studies that have shown that people who are able to write a plan at the beginning of their life end up being able to find that 20 years down the road they have achieved a lot of those plans. So I guess awareness is something very, very important. But something else we've also noted is that there's a lot of interest, especially in the informal sector.
Yes.
For some strange reason, pension is not largely pitched to informal sector. People in the transport matatu industry, it's not exactly it's not, you know, you would find that players in it are doing are relatively well off. They are not exactly struggling financially and are able even to make us set aside 100, 200 shillings. People who are in the taxi business, individuals, even the typical mama mboga. I think our assessment is that they're quite ready and willing to be able to set aside funds. We had an interesting case of an individual who wanted to set up an organization just for formal sector, and they just went, I think, into Gekomba, and they got 1,000 people signing up for an insurance savings product. So there is a lot of, you know, opportunity in that space that can be explored, and definitely a lot of opportunity. Perhaps maybe we need to stop sitting so much at high tables and be able to sit at lower tables, and I believe that maybe would help a lot. Thank you.
Great. Nicholas, I want to come back to you because you're still on that, and a question has just come in on what you've just said around liquidity issues. Someone says that Nicholas talks of liquidity issues, but aren't fund managers meant to manage their funds' duration?
So, Akisa, you said aren't fund managers meant to manage their fund situation? I partly agree, because the overall objective of any retirement benefit scheme is to pay the member. And that is as and when it falls due. So that is a primary role. But in that, when you say the liquidity challenge, on the back side of it, we're also looking at what can pension schemes do to foster growth of the economy. And the discussions about expansion of the GDP, I mean, even the economic free up of time and resources, what this express highway will do goes beyond even our years. And that is where we are trying to reconcile those two. So when we went through, and part of the growth, which I'm sure Nzoma will tell you, is the growth in pension scheme is also a factor of what happened during the Moraria rule, which was very favorable. And it meant you only access your funds when you get to 50. And that made money available for the funds to get into more investments. You saw the jump in property, you saw the appreciation capital markets instruments, which is where we are today, the 1.4 trillion. So the primary role, as is put it, is to pay members when the money falls due. But there's a study which has been done, and Zoma will talk about it, and Sandeep as well, about what it means when people access money in between, before 50. And the studies that we've seen so far is most of that money goes into a lot of abuse and misuse. People forget when you're saving in a pension scheme, they're only taking 10% of your monthly pay. But when you're out of work, or when you've not reached to 50 and you want to access it, are you then saying the 10% is all you relied on? You forget about the 90% you are able to access. So that is a background we're trying to reconcile. But the primary role, as you said, is to always make sure they're paid by the members. So regulation has a way of helping us in terms of making that period a bit longer, making us, as fund managers, be able to match their ability and the available assets. But at the end of the day, as we said, the members of parliament and the lawmakers, and from time to time when they pass the laws, we just have to comply because we have to operate within a governance structure.
And still, we're still, since we're still talking about fund managers, I think I'll come to you, Einstein, about transparency of fund managers. And there's always an issue around the fee charged for service. Talk to us about how do we ensure transparency even with these funds? We're trying to ask more people to invest, but are they transparent?
Well, let me talk. I'll talk first about the transparency aspect of it. I think one of the requirements of the pension schemes is, of course, that at the end of every year you need to be audited. So members of pension schemes are able to see how their funds have performed. They're able to see where their funds are invested, the kind of return that they were able to earn, and that makes sure that there's participation. Again, it's also a requirement. You need to have an annual general meeting, and the fund manager is among the service providers who are present at those meetings to answer questions from the members. And in this COVID situation, we now do that virtually. So that is, those are among the regulations that ensure that there's accountability by all the participants in the whole structure of pension schemes. So I think in terms of transparency, that is already there, and we are also required as fund managers to make returns to the Retirement Benefits Authority, disclosing the investments we've made for our clients. So it's part of the regulatory requirement that we have to abide by as licensees. And I think that is what has given confidence over the years to the growth of the pension industry, because as an employer or you are able to provide your staff with a retirement scheme, and there is that transparency even in terms of the constitution of the trustees. So the whole framework, I think, engenders that aspect of transparency. On the issue of fees, you will be surprised to learn in terms of fees that when you compare the fee rates that are charged compared in Kenya compared to what we see globally, they are very, very low. And again, one of the other things that we also required as fund managers is to actually publish our financial statements. So every 6 months we publish our financials, and you'll be able to see that, for instance, even as we are talking about the 1.4 trillion that is being managed, if you look at the profitability of those fund managers, it is not very high when you compare to the rest of the players in the financial services industry. So I think maybe just to answer the question, yes, from a global perspective, the fee rate is not high, but there's also a lot of transparency in the industry, and you can get access to all this information if one needs
What you're saying is there's no room for monkey business,
Yeah.
quote
No,
unquote.
yeah, we have to do things the right way.
Great.
Yes.
Nzomo, why choose to save with a pension scheme and not a SACCO or a CHAMA? What are the benefits for members?
I'll tell you why you should save for a pension scheme, and I hope Kenyans hear this loud and clear, because that's a very important question. Number one, the pension system is very highly regulated. We have this separation of roles. We have, the fund managers, like Einstein here. We have who do the investments. We have another group called the custodians, who actually keep the assets. We have the administrators who do the records and so on. And then we have up there RBA, who is overseeing all these people and making sure that you're safe. So with all this regulation, you know that this is one place where you can invest and not lose your money. I know we have seen Kenyans losing money in pyramid schemes and so on the other day, but this is a highly regulated space where their money is safe. Number two, it's the only one out of those that you have mentioned that is tax incentivized. So I don't want to use a particular example, but if you put your money in one of those others, you're taxed on your full income. But if you put your money in a pension scheme, you're taxed after removing what you're putting in the pension scheme. So if you're earning 100,000, you put 10,000 in the pension scheme, you pay tax on 90,000. If you put that 10,000 in another of those that you have mentioned, you would have paid tax on the full 100,000. So it's only one which is tax incentivized, as well as on the investment income, and as well as on the benefits that you get. Though, of course, we still ask for more improvements, as Jane has pointed out. And then number three is all these great value additions that we have in the pension space. We have post-retirement medical, we have the mortgage, We have all this flexibility of how you can get your money. We have annuities, you have income drawdowns, we have lump sums, we have all these great value additions that are there. So really, pensions is the way to go for saving.
There's a question here that I want you to respond to. From Christine Mutoko, she says, actually, let's start with Jared Obiero, who says, lower tax band does not look friendly. This is in addition to the comment made by Jane Gitao on the taxation of benefits at the age of 65. Can something be done about it? That question to the CEO.
We have tax incentives for pensions, like I mentioned, but for us in RBA, we are always asking for more. So yes, we would also want more in terms of the tax incentive. Right. But just to confirm, even when you do pay tax, you know, the tax bands for pension are much lower than the tax bands for other income earners. So you would not pay at the 30% and so on that you normally pay. You would pay at much lower rates. But absolutely, I agree with him. We need more, and we continue to urge, you know, government and higher authorities to give us more in terms of tax incentives.
There's another question on taxation from Christine Mutoko. The tax relief given to members for each complete year they contribute to retirement scheme is about 60,000 per year. If a member joins a scheme at the age of 30 and plans to retire at 50 years, the relief given to the member remains 60,000 per year. However, the value of money after 20 years is not the same. Kindly enlighten us on the plan that RBA has to ensure relief or benefits given to the members, that the relief and benefits given to the members match the value of the money they have been saving.
We have exempt tax system, as Simon said. So at the contribution stage, you get the tax exemption. The investment income is exempted, and that is quite a big chunk, because, you know, investment income would actually be the highest part of what you get. So if that has enjoyed tax exemption, that is a big exemption. And then the final part is taxed. But the final part, even though it's taxed, there are those tax-free amounts. For example, the first 20,000 of pension is tax-free. You know, the first 600,000 of lump sum is tax-free, and so on. And then the bands are lower. So certainly, this is an advantageous system for you. And the other thing is, most Kenyans actually get what we call exempt. Because most Kenyans, at the contribution stage, they are, you know, the amount is low, and therefore they get the full benefit. The income is free, and even the pension is below the 20,000, and they get full exemption. Or the lump sum is below the maximum, and they get the full exemption. So many Kenyans enjoy exempt. But of course, for the higher income earners, their salaries are higher, and they now come into the tax bands. Okay. It is certainly advantageous, but yes, we still need more. And the other issue, of course, is that some of these bands have not changed in so long. You know, like the one on contributions has been 20,000 for many, many years. Yeah. So we would really want that to be increased in line with inflation, as has been said.
We're still on taxation. Sandeep, there's a very long question for you here, and I think it's on the subject of tax. I'll try read it as is. And maybe for those who are sending questions, let's try and keep it very short and precise to save time and ensure we cover as much as we can. So to Sandeep, that is M. Korir on our virtual platform. My question is around the taxation and exemptions on retirement remittances, more specifically on the tax exemption on amounts up to 20,000 per month. Now, this has remained static, as you mentioned in your remarks, for 18 years. The discussion around whether or not this should be expanded has been ongoing for long now. We have to admit that incentives such as tax exemptions or tax savings have been to a large extent one of the biggest drivers in terms of uptake of long-term savings. How close are we to prioritizing this item as urgent? And she continued to say, in her opinion, that expanding the exemption amount, bearing in mind the 1/3 rule, will go a long way in enhancing acceptance and penetration of retirement products. So then, back to that question, how close are we to prioritizing this item as urgent?
I wish the KRA were here, Mr. Mutuku, to be able to respond to this, because this is a plea that this is a plea that we make as industry every year, right? So the regulator has been pushing for this, that the 20,000 limit, which has been there for many, many years now, needs to increase, and also we need to have some mechanism for it to increase automatically every year. So the proposal from the regulator and industry is for a substantial increase in the 20,000, and thereafter that it should be increased every year in line with increases in average earnings, in wage earnings. So that way the real value, the value of the 20,000 exemption can keep on going up as inflation goes up. Now, sadly, that has not happened. And often what happens, therefore, is that you find that pension savings at the higher end becomes less tax efficient compared to other investments, right? And that should not be the case. If our intention is to promote long-term saving, which pension saving does, then we would urge the Treasury that we need to see a significant increase.
Right.
And I would go further to say, and I'm sure that Ezekiel, myself, and Abid can actually model this for the government, to say that the revenue that you may lose from that, in increasing the exemption beyond 20,000, will be more than offset from the increase in savings and the lowering in interest rates that we would see as a country. So I think we need to be a little bit more foresighted, and we would strongly urge the policymakers collectively to say, let us see a significant increase. I just want to reiterate the point that was made by Mrs. Gitao, right? Because it's one that is creating so much problems for old age pensioners, especially those who have crossed 65, with an expectation that they would be able to take that lump sum tax-free. So we really, again, want to make a plea to the National Treasury and the KRA that, look, this needs to be addressed so that pensioners don't feel that they were shortchanged, right? Because this is actually what seems to be happening. Exactly, right? And the amounts are not significant, and we should do what is right by them.
Thank you very much. I think I'll give you a chance to finish your point. I remember I left you off somewhere, Jane, before I let our other speakers come on the podium. We'll have about another 40 minutes left. So then I'll let you have your last point. We get our speakers, then we come back for closing remarks. Yes.
Thank you very much. And even for giving me the opportunity. I think I am also enjoying the moment that I am alone in this panel. So I also need to enjoy the moment and be able to set the pace for the next celebration, the next birthday. So I continue on the agenda of the post-retirement. And I want also for us to embrace and have a takeaway from here that the World Health Organization has declared the 2020 to 2030 the decade of healthy aging. It is so timely with our regulator. However, through our regulator and from the past history and record, we cannot celebrate that decade without changing the way we are doing things. Aging matters do not require just one party. It requires a multiple party working together in harmony. So I think I'm also entitled to dictate the kind of a behavior I need to see in the next decade from my regulator. One, as a regulator. Secondly, so a regulator who we trust to be able to deliver on that. Secondly, I think personally I'll be retiring within the decade as a practitioner for that long. So I also want to be able
you're
to
defending your rights as well.
Yes, to be able to celebrate the work that we have done. So by in so doing is by getting a guarantee that we have a system that is assuring us of healthy aging in retirement. And I'll give my regulator the tips. One, for us to be able to manage this process and to be able to achieve the post-retirement medical, we need to change the way we play this game. First, let's acknowledge, you see the way you have been able to put us together as associations, prayers, and all that, and we can come together and celebrate the birthday. And we are not hiding, we are happy because there is growth. Now, the next behavior that may be expected is like that one of an advocate. You see the way advocates say, my client, and they can die for the client. We also want the regulator to die for us as the client, the retirees.
Yes.
How will that be? Post-retirement will require that there is harmony between the Ministry of Health, the NSSF, NHIF, and us as players. And of course, KRA, you have heard the taxation matters.
Right.
In the past, we have put proposals, and maybe we wait whether they come through or they don't come through. Supposing we change and have a round table and say, you have this policy, it is good in your eyes, but it is affecting me in this way.
Okay.
If we have a round table and discuss how we are going to be affected. Mind you, this decade is for all of us, irrespective of which roles we are taking in our offices. We are all going to retire. Mm-hmm. What is this that we can do to make sure that Kenya is a nation that we all be desiring to age in or retire in? So I think we need to look at it. Again, we also need to complete the National Retirement Benefits Policy, right, so that we can be able to entrench harmony within the service providers, the systems, and everything, and then we'll be able to enjoy retirement.
Great, Jane. Thank you. Thank you very much. We will be back for closing remarks. I would like to invite a number of speakers. Thank you very much for making this round very engaging. Please don't leave. Please don't leave. We will be back to you for some closing remarks. But let's get a few thoughts from a number of people here. I believe that's Ezekiel. Yes, great. Thank you. You're first on my list. From the Actuarial Society of Kenya, you can, yes. So a lot has been said here. Perhaps let's just get your thoughts on then what is the future of this industry? Yeah, very keen on the guidelines. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So from our end as Actuarial Society, we, as actuaries, our work is to support these initiatives, but there are areas we need to think about. One of the areas is on the post-retirement funds. People have to go and get an insurer to take that risk. As you're aware, insurers have not been taking risks for the old people, so we've been trying to design products for now where insurers take risk for 1 year. So you can go and buy a policy for your mother, if she's 60, 70, but for 1 year only. But the vision is, if you look at other markets, there's something called long-term care. You're able to buy insurance for 10 years, 20 years. But insurers don't have that risk appetite for now, so we are working with them on that. And then the second area that we need to support these initiatives for RBA is the issue of, and this is where the fund managers come in, the issue of inflation protection for the funds. You can't have a post-retirement fund and then you invest in government bonds. The price of Panadol goes faster than the return you're getting. So one area you need to think about is some of these funds being invested in hospitals, in drug factories, because what that does is the fund itself, the cost of Panadol today, you want to be able to buy a Panadol 30 years from now. But if you put it in a government bond, which is only giving you 12, and inflation on healthcare is higher, then that would be an issue. So collective investment schemes need to come in to support that conversation. Pension schemes need to start owning hospitals, and that's an area that is very critical for that. So, because for us as actuaries, you can tell us to price for you a product, but if the assets are not matching the liability, then the product will be expensive because we have to put fat in for the people. So that means obviously RBA working with people like IRA and CMA, obviously, to make that happen. And then the last item is, for example, on same thing on post-retirement funds. We did talk to people like government, civil servants. Some of the people are really earning, if you take out the pension amount and you look at what that can buy, if somebody is earning 20,000 shillings and then you say, I want to take money for retirement, and they're retiring in 10 years, that money won't be enough. So there has to also be a conversation about low-income earners, whether there can be development of low-cost health facilities that can be used for that. Okay. Obviously, people like NHF can come in there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd like also to invite Anthony Mwiviga, who's the CEO of ABSA Asset Management Limited, to give us his remarks. Anthony, you don't have to. can use the podium here. He will use the podium. Yeah, thank you. Anthony, thank you. A round of applause for him. Thank you very much for joining us here today. Kindly just use this. You can give us your remarks.
Thank you. And just like my colleagues here, congratulations again, RBA, for this auspicious day. 20 years, not a mean feat, regulating such an important industry. So just like my colleagues from the Fund Management Association of Kenya, is first and foremost to thank RBA and congratulate them for giving us a chance to manage very special funds for people's future and retirement. But more importantly, also to pose the challenge there that pension schemes, you are in good hands. Of the all regulated service providers in the pension industry, fund managers, we are the most, and we've had a good run in managing pension schemes. We are up to the challenge of managing and investing in upcoming new asset classes. My colleagues from the FMA have mentioned our ability to invest in infrastructure, in private equity, and any other alternative investments which are coming on board. So we are building our skill set. We are taking the challenge and we are passing over to the issuers of new securities. We are encouraging the listed space led by the Nairobi Securities Exchange to bring more companies, to bring more sectors. And also we are also encouraging and challenging the government to bring more innovative government securities in form of treasury bonds and treasury bills with different features, and we are willing to submit proposals to improve investment opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Round of applause for him. Thank you. That is Anthony Muthiga, CEO, Absa Asset Management Limited. I'd also like to invite to the podium Patrick Kariuki, who's the CEO, Gen Africa Asset Managers, to also give us his remarks. Remember, we are using the hashtag RBA at 20 or hashtag RBA turns 20. Thank you for all of you who've been engaging with us so far. Let's keep the tweets and the comments coming and the questions. We just have well over 30 minutes to go. So let's keep the engagement coming as I give a chance to Patrick Kariuki, the CEO, Gen Africa Asset Managers. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Good afternoon, everybody, and it's my great pleasure to be here. 20 years is a time to celebrate. Let us celebrate 20 years of improving the pension sector, of improving the saving stock of our nation. We must celebrate, but we must also know there are miles to go. I remember I was only 4 years in the industry when the Retirement Benefit Act was passed and operationalized in the year 2000. And I remember there was a lot of resistance from players at that time. And we had to do a lot of education together with the RBA. And I also recall Sandeep talking to numerous schemes, numerous trustees, explaining why you have to have segregation of functions, why you have to have an administrator either in-house or outsourced, had to have a custodian, and also had to have a separate fund manager. But schemes have come to appreciate when they've seen it working, when they've seen the benefits going ahead. And now, looking ahead to the next 20 years, I just have 3 simple dreams. My first dream is, when a child is born in Kenya in the next 20 years, my dream is that the parents would have been educated enough about pensions that they would even open for them a pension account at birth, and that we as industry players would have such an account in place. And my second dream is that we will all appreciate that pensions is for pensions. Once you put a shilling into your pension pot, let us not remove it. Let it grow, let it build, let it get the miracle of reinvestment, so that at the end of your working life, when you come to retire, there's a very good pot. So let us focus, pension is for pension. Pension is for pension, apart from a post-retirement medical fund and apart from a mortgage in order to have a roof over your head in safety. But let us focus on pensions is for pensions. And then my third dream, which has been briefly touched on, is that when a Kenyan gets a pension in old age, that pension is inflation linked. Many people who retired 20, 30 years ago, because of inflation, because of that blood pressure called inflation, their purchasing power is much, much less. In their initial years, they were able to save well, they were able to live well, but now they are just sliding into poverty. So us as an industry, let us put our heads together and let us see how we can have pensions inflation protected. So to the RBA, congratulations once again, and we are there to support you over the next 20 years. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you very much for speaking to us, Patrick Karaoke, CEO, Gen Africa Asset Managers, with very good words to leave us with. Finally, we also have Paul Okwemba from the Association of Retirement Benefit Schemes to just come give us his remarks as he comes to the podium. Thank you very much.
I would like to congratulate RBA and possibly give them an A grade for the last 20 years. But the moment I give them the A grade, then I extend the scoring to A++, meaning that there is much more to be done. Mm-hmm. And the future is great, but to achieve that greatness, you need to have the strategy. I'm a trustee, and one of the questions that we ask ourselves all the time when somebody retires is whether they're taking home enough money for their sustainability. So we have been looking at this, and I feel the other thing that, the other strategy that RBA needs to put in place is to broaden the stakeholder base. Retirement is a social security issue and is not a finance issue. So I'd like to see the Cabinet Secretary and the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection coming in as a key stakeholder, because there are certain things that can be articulated better by the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection and not necessarily Treasury and RBA. I would also want to see the law on retirement benefits anchored in the Employment Act, because that is the mother document that determines what we do with our employees when we employ them. So instead of leaving it as a choice, or instead of having the inadequate NSSF cover that is there, I would wish to see the Employment Act explicitly state that on employment, you'll have to contribute 5% or 6% or 7% of your income, and the employer will double that, and you will put it in a registered pension fund from day one. I think where we sit, education is good, awareness is good, but we are in such a state that it will take a long time for people to appreciate that there is urgency in trying to achieve adequate income in retirement. So the best thing is try and use legislation to at least coerce them, for lack of a better word, to coerce them to start saving early enough. And when they start saving, then they'll see the benefit, and you'll not have to struggle again to tell them to save. In fact, most of them will now start to increase their savings month on month or year after year. So I congratulate you, RBA, and I look forward for you bringing in more stakeholders. The other stakeholders, I'm a member of IHRM. We are human resource managers. We have influence on the people, on policies. Why can't you get us on the table? We have our mother organization like FKE. Let us sit together and put in our contributions, because it's our pride. It's our pride as HR practitioners or employers when we see that people are going home with enough income.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul Okwemba from the Association of Retirement Benefit Scheme. And as I mentioned earlier, this was a virtual conference. It's only fair that we give those who have joined us virtually a chance to also say something. I'll give each of them about 3 minutes to say something before we wrap it up. But unfortunately, because of time, I'll just acknowledge their presence. Dr. Christopher Hisa joining us on our virtual platform. He's a managing trustee of NSSF. Thank you very much for joining us. And I saw your congratulatory message to RBA. Asante sana. Jose Akili, who's the MD, CPF, also joining us on the virtual platform. Thank you very much for staying with us through the conversation. And Dr. Edison Nyale, who's a representative from National Treasury, all joining us from our virtual platform. So with a few minutes remaining before we hand the program back, remember we are live on KTN News, joining you or coming to you live from Bomas of Kenya. I will give our panelists a last round to give their closing remarks. And I'll just ask one question. What do the next 20 years look like for you? I'll start with you, Ezekiel.
For us, the next 20 years, we expect to see the pension sector being an integral role in our lives, as opposed to right now just being, a deduction on your pay slip. We expect to see more pension funds being part of the society in the next 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. CEO, I want to come to you last because there are a few questions for you. Let me speak to Jane because I saw a question for you. I want to just grab it on our virtual platform here. Jane, what do the next 20 years look like for you?
The next 20 years, I look forward to having a nation where both the young and the old people, the retirees, are enjoying their lives because the young ones are sure about their retirement. The already retired ones are happy and enjoying their retirement because they'll be enjoying healthy living, courtesy of all the policies that will be in place to ensure that happens. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Nicholas, what does the future look like?
Thank you, Akisa. 20 years from now, I'll probably be very keen on whether Jane's proposals have gone through or not. So I think 20 years be quite something. Mm-hmm. But for me, from where I sit and how I see things, there's a very strong push in terms of innovation. And I know that will spill over strongly into the retirement benefit sector. Mm-hmm. And you're already seeing it in terms of the products that are being offered. And for the next 20 years, I expect to see a robust system, mm-hmm. Which covers all the way from the things that matter. She talked about healthcare, she talked about education, talked about standards of living, and all that. I bet 50% will come from the retirement benefit savings. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. Abed?
Thank you very much. I think from my end, I would say three things. One is pensions being used a lot in development of the economy. The second one is around lifestyle. I think the first 20 years have been about creating the infrastructure for people to be able to save well. But in terms of the next 20 years, people retiring on better retirement packages, having houses through this mortgage financing, also being able to meet their medical costs in retirement. So a second one is around just change of lifestyles. The third one I think would be maybe a move away from where people start planning at age 20 or 25 to start saving, to maybe what was mentioned by the Gen Africa CEO around starting to save from day one when one is born. Mm-hmm. I think that would be a very interesting development.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Santa Sana Einstein. There's a question for you where someone was asking whether there's a working framework between the fund managers and CMA and RBA to try and avoid overlaps in decision making, as you give us your closing remarks.
Okay. Maybe I can give you from an FMA perspective. Yeah. We actually have a stakeholders committee, actually which I chair. And basically our work is to engage with all the stakeholders. And the key stakeholders for us are the regulators. And here we're talking about the CMA and the RBA, so that we are able to engage on matters that relate to our industry. And we've achieved a lot in terms of basically building that relationship. I'm sure you can see that we are quite well represented in
You
these
are,
celebrations because we have an excellent relationship with our regulator, because we are also interested in growing the retirement benefit sector. And as fund managers, as the people who are entrusted with this money to manage, it's important that we are able to have that framework and working relationship. So that, I would say, from a FMA perspective, yes, we work very closely with our regulators to ensure that we are able to bring together our issues. We also have a history. I mean, there are times we also lobby. We also present issues that we believe should be factored into policy. So that is something that we actively work towards. In terms of closing remarks and answering your questions, mine are just two. One, increased more sophistication in terms of the investment instruments that retirement schemes are involved in, and that will require innovation in order to address some of the issues that have been raised, for instance, by the actuaries in terms of inflation protection and making sure that the instruments that you invest in are able to address the specific needs of your clientele. And secondly, I think Abed has already mentioned that, is that we have a more vibrant retirement sector that is actively involved in the development of the country, so that there is actually that visible presence that, you can say that, in terms of this infrastructure project, schemes, retirement schemes invested in it. And I think that will engender a sense of ownership in the economic development of the country.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, CEO. You are our host, so you will have the last word on this before we close. What do we expect in the next coming years from RBA? What are you telling members and those who are also planning to take up schemes as we wind up?
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next 20 years are going to be great, I think, for the retirement benefits industry. I foresee all Kenyans being in pension schemes well before even the 20 years. And why do I say that? Government is working on what they're calling the National Retirement Benefits Policy, which is looking at how we are going to bring together all the stakeholders, as Jane and we have heard from others, Ministry of Labor, for example, NHIF, and all the other groups that have been mentioned. So that you have one holistic policy which is capturing all aspects that have to do with retirement. Government is also working on an informal sector scheme to bring on board parties in the informal sector, so that if you're a group of, let's say, border operators, you can easily plug into this without having to set up your own infrastructure or administration and all that. Government will subsidize by putting in place the infrastructure, and then all these groups, this Mama Mboga's group, they can come in. If it's matatu drivers and so on, they can all plug. So that's something which government, we are working with them, and that is something which is coming soon. And again, we're also looking at what has been mentioned in terms of compulsion, auto-enrollment, where people are automatically enrolled in schemes, and then if they want to opt out, let them opt out, but at least they had that option. So we're looking at all these exciting areas in terms of expanding coverage. I think in terms of adequacy, I did mention a number of things that we are doing. Of course, a lot more of education, a lot more value addition in terms of the pension product, diversifying investment so that we can get the higher return, so that people get more, and also trying to control on leakages, which reduce the ultimate product. In terms of stability, I think we have a very strong regulatory framework which is in place, and we are still improving it. We do still keep making changes. You saw that we are bringing a change, for example, to regulate corporate trustees. We are bringing a change to regulate post-retirement medical, which are done out of schemes. And we continue to strengthen that so that we have a stable system. So I think going forward, things will only get better. As an institution, as RBA, of course, we are still going to try to continue our own operations, improve them. We have put in place a lot of IT. That is why we are able to, do all our things online. All these service providers you're seeing here, they submit all their documents online. They don't have to come to offices. We're able to, in fact, when COVID came for us, it was a very smooth transition because we had already put in place a lot of that. So we're doing a lot of IT, we are doing a lot of management systems in areas like BCP, knowledge management, information security, and so on, as well as to improve the internal operations of RBA. So we hope we'll be able to move from A grade to triple A, as was mentioned.
It can only get better.
It can only get better.
Thank you.
I think before I close, just allow me to thank all those who have helped us over the 20 years. Let me start with the RBA team. I can see them here online. They are following, and later on we'll be able to acknowledge them more. But I just want to thank the board, the staff of RBA. We have staff who have been with us from day one, so they have done 20 years, and we really appreciate them. And others who have come on board along the way. I want to thank the government and the National Treasury. They have been so supportive. They have really embraced our proposals and so on, and we have seen a lot of good support coming from government, particularly the Treasury. I want to thank the industry players, many of whom are here. We would not have gotten this far without the good support that we got from the industry, whether it is the fund managers, the custodians, the administrators, the actuaries, the accountants, the lawyers, whole plethora of people who support the pension sector.
Great.
I must thank the scheme trustees who we work with on daily basis. They are the ones who run the schemes, and they have really been accommodative to all this change. You know, you're here running your scheme, RBA comes and says, we want you to do this, and they have accepted and they have done it well, and now we are having a great industry. And finally, to the members of the schemes who, of course, are the ultimate beneficiaries. You are the ones we do all this for. So we really appreciate the support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And that's how we wind it up at this hour. Thank you for joining us, watching us from home on KTN News. Thank you for joining us on this 20th anniversary celebrations for the Retirement Benefits Authority. I hope you have been challenged to take up serious saving, and you can go to their website www.rba.co.ke for more information and even on the kind of schemes you can join and some of the products that are there for you. For those of you joining us on our virtual platforms, thank you for engaging with us from 9 a.m. to now. We don't take it for granted. Thank you for your time, your insights, questions and comments on the chat room, and of course all those joining us from social media. Remember, we continue with the hashtag RBA at 20, RBA turns 20. I have been your host, Akisa Wandera. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day. I think we are good. I can release you now. Thank you very much.
Hello, it's me, your end of month buddy. I'm in your wallet and your bank account. Yeah, I am money. The one you love to hate because you gotta work for me. I'm here to work for you. I mean, I'm here to save you. Allow me to introduce you to some familiar friends. See these guys?
It's been a while, yo. Sinisahau. They have money.
Tuko hapa na wewe. And these guys?
See you soon.
Achanga kupotea hivyo.
Boss, salimianga watu.
Buy me.
You need me more.
They are waiting for you to mess up. And then they'll mess you up big time.
we had no issues. But over that time, now we have everybody has a laptop.
We were very passionate about our institution, and we were very driven, and we still are. And in those formative years, we found an organization that was very well led. We had great leaders, and the management took a bottom-up approach to management. So most of us were included in a lot of activities of establishing the organization, systems, policies that came to be the backbone of this organization.
When we started, of course, not many people knew about the retirement benefit sector. But more importantly also, there was no institution that had been charged with the responsibility of ensuring that this particular sector needs to be regulated according to the provisions of the law. So the coming up of the Retirement Benefits Act in 1997, and of course the gazettement of the regulations in the year 2000, really brought in some sense of order in this particular industry. And so I'm very proud that with the coming in of these particular regulations and the Act has actually made it possible for people to have confidence.
We came in as a regulator, one of the new regulators. At that time, the financial sector, the key regulator was the central bank. And for the retirement benefit schemes, it was some little regulation was done by KRA in terms of tax, but there was no regulation in terms of any other aspects of the schemes.
The percentage of coverage was only 12%. In the last 20 years, it has doubled. We are now at around 22.
The size of the pension industry is 10 times what it was 20 years ago. And I think that's testament to the work of the Retirement Benefits Authority, but also the investment professionals and other stakeholders, including fund managers, working in the industry. We've seen strong investment returns over the last 20 years, which has aided this growth. And we've seen a diversification in clients' assets under management. And over the years, the Retirement Benefits Authority have increased the scope of assets that can be invested in. And this now includes areas such as private equity and ETFs, which also allow clients to spread their risk and diversify.
Since the RBA, the authority took over the regulation of the pension sector, we recognize it has grown in leaps and bounds, and that can actually be attributed to the role the regulator, who is the authority, has played in the industry.
Over the last 20 years, we have been able to register over 1,250 schemes, which is a considerable growth for the industry. We have also registered the occupational schemes, individual pension plans, and also umbrella schemes, which covers employers without occupational schemes. We have been able to register many service providers, which includes the fund managers, custodians, administrators, and also we have been able to create an enabling regulatory framework whereby we have come up with the regulations, practice notes, guidelines to provide some framework on which the pension industry must be managed. Then we have also looked at the issues of investment. Remember, for pension funds, investment is critical. What we have done is to come up with investment guidelines to guide the industry on how pension assets should be invested. We have come up with what we call Table G, with about 15 investment asset classes, whereby it guides the fund managers, the trustees, and also the administrators on how to invest the pension funds.
If you look at the milestones that RBA has gone through over the years. It is one institution which other institutions are copying. Yeah, they're coming for benchmarking to see this institution, and it's basically because of the policies we have put in place, the systems which were put in place. It's an institution which runs on its own. It doesn't really matter who is in charge, because it is things have been put in place, and I'm happy that I'm seeing a continuation. It's a system, it's running on its own, whether somebody is there or not. It's already, the base is there.
You look at the market outside there. We normally scan the environment, and among the people who have contributed a lot to establishment of certain, some of those schemes which lead to retention of the staff here. E.g., we have our mortgage facility, which is one of those facility which has been a benchmark to so many institutions. They come here for benchmark to start up. CMA came here, IRA came here, Sastra came here. All these institutions, they come here to benchmark. When the government was starting theirs, SRC came here to borrow that policy and came up with the 3%. Or the authority already had this facility in place. Now, when you have a mortgage, it's a long term, and therefore you have to pay it and finish up with it. When you move from RBA, of course, you are likely to go to the market rate, which is 13%, which is very expensive. So you are likely to retain staff if you have this facility.
As actuaries, we play a very integral role in the design and the proper financial management of retirement funds. We also play a very important role in protecting and safeguarding the benefits of members of retirement funds. And therefore, we have a very close working relationship as the Actuarial Society of Kenya with the RBA. We engage and frequently have interactions on policy matters, on technical issues, on ways in which we can improve the retirement benefit sector. We have frequent interaction with the RBA, and indeed last year we actually had a full-day workshop between the task and the RBA to discuss industry issues.
I remember back in 2006 or so, we got ISO certification. We are one of the first public institutions to get ISO certification, and then later on we also got the new certification when it changed. I remember when we launched some of the new products, like the post-retirement medical fund. It was a very exciting time for us because it enables members of schemes to save for medical in retirement. I also remember when we brought on board other exciting things like the Trustee Development Program of Kenya, which we launched some time back, and which is a way of making sure that our trustees of our schemes are well qualified to run those schemes. I think that was also an exciting development. We're excited about the recent change for mortgage, so that members of schemes can get houses when they retire or before they retire, using what they've accumulated or part of what they've accumulated in the fund. So yes, we have had all these exciting developments, but I think perhaps the greatest joy for us is just the stability of the industry. Because at the end of the day, saving for retirement is all about stability, and the fact that we have been able to maintain a stable industry and actually to reduce the overall risk rating of the industry so that it's less risky for our members.
One of the improvements that we envisage is the uptake of the informal sector. This is clearly defined in our current strategic plan, and it is in all our KPIs for different departments, so that we are able to improve on the uptake of the informal sector, which employs a huge number of Kenyans, and which needs to start saving for retirement, which is very, very vital.
The team of RBA and